death, horror, disparity just keeps on coming, ladies and gentlemen, because the United States once again has pledged for more and more and more money to be sent to Ukraine to fast track our way to nuclear annihilation. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, another $1.1 billion the United States is sending in aid to Ukraine as war heads into its 8th month. Now, I will add to that it's the 8th month that we've seen destruction, but it's not the 8th month of war, because the war did not start when Russia came in. The war has started since before 2014. The war has started since the United States got involved with Ukraine. And we knew this from the start. We knew this from, examining the history of Ukraine, going through the years and years precedent before the Russian invasion came in. We knew about this from the start. We knew that, politicians were mentioning about Russia. 2016, Lindsey Graham even mentioned about how we need to build our aggression towards Russia and how we need to stabilize in Ukraine. We need to funnel this money to neo-Nazis. They knew about the neo-Nazis beforehand, obviously, because we basically installed them, we pursued them, we trained them, and we aligned them to form the Ukrainian government that's currently causing chaos and destruction in their own country. And we know that this is involving, geopolitics. This is about aggression post-Cold War. This is all about a pipeline and the Minsk Accord. Stuff like that. Stuff you were not being told by the mainstream media. They still want you to believe that Russia is still the bad guy. They still want to get you into this paranoia, this, post-Russia Gates mongering campaign that people have been indoctrinated to believe that Russia is the cause and problem to all their situations. And it seems like a bad, James Bond film, really, to put all your blame onto Russia when they're not really, when really the faults of situational problems, especially domestically, is the United States. We're the ones that build the aggression to lead to this situation. We're the ones that caused this chaos to provoke. We've been poking the bear ever since, and Russia decided enough is enough. That's pretty much what happened. And just to remind you again that every House Democrat vowed to keep this going, including the squad, including AOC, including Bernie, including Ro Khanna, including Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar and Ayanna Pressley. All those individuals that were supposed to bring on the ruckus and were supposed to de-escalate the war have now tied themselves to the war party because they are now part of the war establishment. And they're willing to do everything that they can because Putin, Russia, propaganda, racist, misogyny, identity politics, bullshit, whatever they feel like coming up with the excuse today, that's why they're doing this. And AOC was recently called out for it. And AOC responded by saying that they are pro-Putin apologists. That they're spreading propaganda for two individuals to bring on the ruckus. For two individuals to call out AOC for not doing what she was campaigned for. For two individuals to actually bring attention to de-escalating the possibility of nuclear war. Just to remind people, every House Democrat voted to keep this going. In fact, the only people that are against it is 57 Republicans. 57 Republicans. So, majority of the political class of the United States, just in the United States, voted to go along with nuclear aggression. And I've said this before, I don't hear a lot happening in Canadian Parliament on this situation. I don't hear anybody trying to de-escalate nuclear tensions in Canadian Parliament. I don't think they're even mentioning this in European Parliament. So that's just how crazy this is. As JFK said in his powerful moment of speech, or his powerful speech on peace, that this is a collective death wish by the political establishment class, by the global leaders, by the global elites, that rather kill us all than solve problems. And luckily, there are a few individuals that are calling this out. Like I said, there's two people that called out AOC. Tulsi Gabbard has been very vocal on social media and has a podcast show talking about the tensions of war. Jimmy Dore, the Gray Zone, Aaron Mate, you're about to see here, appeared on Tucker Carlson, doing fantastic work. Aaron Mate, that TYT notoriously called a Putin apologist and a bad journalist, because apparently bad journalists are the ones that go to the scene of a crime and investigate things. Oh my God, that sounds like journalism. You know, the thing that Anna Kasparian has no integrity for. Same with Chunk Uger. But so Aaron Mate appeared on Tucker Carlson, because Tucker Carlson apparently is the only person with a show with a broadcast network to air an interview with the Gray Zone or any outsider organization that's willing to counteract to the mainstream establishment of nuclear war. And Aaron Mate points out the Squad and Bernie Sanders have voted lockstep with GOP and Democratic neocons to funnel billions into weapons industry and fuel the disastrous Ukraine proxy war. All while Biden openly rejects diplomacy. As we saw this week, anti-war constituents are calling them out on it. So here's what Aaron Mate said on Tucker Carlson about the Squad and AOC and Bernie. Take a listen.
Look, Tucker, I'm someone who was very inspired by the Squad when all of them first ran. I think all of them have shown courage, and I agree with the domestic policies that they support, especially Medicare for all. And also, I'm a big fan of Chapo Trap House. I'm seeing their live show tomorrow. But right now, overall, the progressive movement, when it comes to the most important issue in the world, is dead. We have a proxy war against a nuclear armed power. The active U.S. policy, as Lloyd Austin made clear, is not to defend Ukraine, it's to weaken Russia. People like Lindsey Graham have said out loud that as long as we arm Ukraine, they will fight to the last person. And where are progressives on this? Every single time the Ukraine proxy war has come up for a vote, they voted in lockstep for it. Every single Democrat, including Bernie Sanders. Even as news has come out that the U.S. has sabotaged peace talks, even as Joe Biden, as you just played, openly says that he won't negotiate with Russia to end this war, there is no force in Washington right now for sanity, calling for diplomacy, which I thought is what being a progressive is supposed to be about. Yes. And you saw in that clip a very angry expression from those protesters feeling let down by their progressive elected representatives.
Aaron Mate nails it right on the head there. And that is the struggle that people are feeling. That people like AOC, Bernie Sanders, and the progressive Squad that was supposed to bring on the ruckus turned out to be a failed experiment. Turned out the idea of turning the the Democratic Party around to be more anti-war and being back to the party of the working people has completely failed. Because once you enter a cult, you become part of the cult. And that's what AOC has done. That's what Bernie Sanders has done. You've walked into the Democratic cult. You've aligned yourselves with Democratic leadership and the insiders and the establishment to the point where you become the insider. You became the establishment. You became everything that you're supposed to be railing against. And now people are calling you out on it. They're calling you out to realize that you that campaigned on this are nothing more than a liar. You are nothing more than a career-climbing politician, and it's no different than the establishment Joe that we knocked out in place of you. We could have had Joe Crowley then instead of AOC if there was going to be the lack of difference between the two. Because really, I don't see the difference now. AOC, who I thought was supposed to be this visionary of bringing on the ruckus and challenging the status quo, challenging the Democratic Party, challenging Nancy Pelosi. I don't see that anymore. And I've been questioning ever since, when they did the CARES Act, they completely ignored people that were in need during the pandemic situation to funnel the most money to Wall Street. We've seen this with Russiagate. We've seen this with so many other things. Because they're just career-climbing cowards that don't call out the people that they're supposed to be fighting against. And it shows what complete frauds they are. They're progressives. Fauxgressives. complete utter nonsense. And Aaron Mate completely points that out. Award-winning journalist. So here's Aaron Mate again saying progressives voting to fund the Ukraine proxy war while staying silent on Biden's rejection of diplomacy are not just fueling a dangerous crisis, they are also enabling a Russiagate propaganda campaign that has been used to directly sabotage them, as Bernie Sanders learned in 2020. And still to this day, they have not called that out. They have not called that the Democratic Party purposely cheated Bernie Sanders twice. Twice. How the Democratic Party went against AOC when she was running. How the Democratic Party went against Tulsi Gabbard. Not a single goddamn word was called out. Not one person was held accountable for the fact that they cheated their own primaries. They sabotaged democracy for their own just gains. Not a single person had the courage and stamina to call these people out. I know Tulsi Gabbard did. Tulsi Gabbard went heavily hearted when Hillary Clinton said on a podcast that she was groomed by Russia, and that Tulsi Gabbard was a favorite of Putin's. And that's when Tulsi Gabbard said she was the queen of the warmongers, which is absolutely correct. There's no doubt about it. That's a factual claim. But not AOC, not Bernie. Bernie would rather say Joe Biden is his best friend than actually question the fact that he lost the primary twice. The most popular candidate running for president lost his campaign twice, and they gave it to Demented Joe. Nobody has any questions about that. Nobody has any concerns or any accountability on why the most popular politician lost to a completely demented person. Anyway, here's Aaron Mate.
I mean, if Marjorie Taylor Greene is more anti-war than Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and she is, then we're an upside-down world. Like, this is true craziness. Will this change, or is she in for as long as it takes, too?
Well, look, a major problem in the Democratic Party has been the propaganda campaign known as Russiagate. For 6 years, Democrats have been taught to believe that Russia is an existential enemy that can brainwash millions of Americans into not supporting Hillary Clinton and swinging elections. And that now, accordingly, when it comes to this proxy war, that there's no point in negotiating with them, even though, by the way, Russiagate has been used to undermine a progressive agenda, not just being used to funnel billions of dollars into the military-industrial complex, but also has been used to sabotage progressive candidates. Remember Bernie Sanders? Bernie Sanders in 2016 came very close to winning the Democratic Party nomination. Hillary Clinton lost that race to Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton responded by blaming Russia for everything and concocting a conspiracy theory that Trump was a Russian asset. Bernie Sanders, instead of calling that out, went along with it, and he was rewarded in 2020 when he was, surging in the primaries before Nevada. He was Russiagated. Some leaks were made that were accusing Russia of supporting him. So that's how the Democratic Party rewards even progressives who are loyal to their agenda. And at that,
let's not forget. Bernie Sanders went along with the Russiagate scandal in 2016 when Hillary Clinton concocted and orchestrated that scheme to go against Donald Trump because she lost to a freaking game show host. That's how terrible of a person she is. Concocted a scheme to blame another country in another continent across the globe for her own mistakes. Bernie Sanders went along with it, and then he ran in 2020, and then he gets Russiagated, and nobody says a word about it. Not even him. He didn't even bother to question it. He didn't even bother to say, hey, this doesn't make sense. Why am I part of this Russiagate scandal? I went along with the Clinton campaign. I side with Hillary Clinton because I think, she's better than Donald Trump. Blah, 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 blah. And then he got Russiagated, and he just took it. This is how unbelievably crazy, backwards, upside down, like Tucker Carlson said, nothing makes sense. Nothing makes sense anymore. We live in a parallel universe where the people that are supposed to be the most trusted, influential people that we have elected them because they thought they were gonna bring change, are now being the exact opposite. They done a complete 180 to the point that they are the things that they're supposed to be railing against. AOC and Bernie Sanders have become the Democratic establishment. They have become the war party. They have become the new faces of neoliberalism. They have become the new faces of imperialistic empire and the bloodthirsty neocons that control us. They have become the new faces. And they can't come to terms with it because they don't realize that they have stepped into a cult and they become part of it. That's why the Justice Democrats was such a failed experiment. Anyone that walks into the Democratic Party is not going to change the party up. It's not going to influentially change with just new leaders and new faces. These two political establishments, Democrat and Republican, they're part of the war duopoly. They're so massively corrupted, it's a cult. Once you walk in, you're now part of it. And if you don't align with them, you're going to be smashed down. You're going to be Russian-gated. They're going to do whatever it takes. And that's why Bernie Sanders and AOC and all these other people, rather than actually calling out the party, and because they don't want to turn into a Ralph Nader situation or Tulsi Gabbard where she had to denounce she left the party, they don't want to do that. They want to stay in the political establishment. They want their, cushy career jobs. They want the money. They want the luxury. They want the fame and the fortune. So they're going to go along with the establishment. And they're going to call out people that are actually holding them accountable. Which is the most American patriotic thing I can imagine someone doing. Calling out a politician for not enacting safety and security in the possibility, in the threat of nuclear war. And like I said, only very few people, only very, very few people are willing to have the stance and courage and stamina to call this out, including Aaron Mate. Aaron Mate, who is appearing on Tucker Carlson, to be one of the very few voices to have common sense to de-escalate war. I can't believe in this day and age that is now dangerous. That now makes you cringeworthy. That we're in a state of affairs right now that someone like me that posts, peace and prosperity and how we need to negotiate and, talking about de-escalation, somehow I'm the fringe character because I'm not willing to self-sacrifice myself for a bunch of global leaders. Just kind of the sickening world that we live in. And here's another person that I've also admired too, because she's been very vocal on this situation. I almost imagine her as a new AOC, and she's not even part of the U.S. Parliament or the U.S. Political system. She's part of the she's from Ireland, I do believe, right? Yeah, Dublin, Ireland. She's a member of the European Parliament. Claire Daly. We've shown her multiple times. She's an excellent vocal supporter of peace. She's definitely on the rails of, anti-war, anti-imperialism. She's dropped truth bomb after truth bomb, and just absolutely wonderful to hear her speak. And she's going to call out the true sponsors of state terrorism, because right now the mainstream media has endlessly railed and trying to propagandize people to think that Russia is responsible for all the terrorism that has happened. All the terrorism that has happened is because it's somehow linked to Vladimir Putin's regime of militarization around the world. Even though the United States takes full credit to that. The United States notoriously does that on the regular. They're proud to take domination around the world and create a bunch of these terror groups, but they're pinning this on Russia to foment propaganda and manipulation to further build aggression. But Claire Daly, being one of the voices of reason, is going to spit out the truth of who's really sponsoring the terror in the world.
State sponsor of terrorism is a term of US law. It doesn't exist in EU law. But a Zelensky advisor called for it in the Parliament magazine, and here we are again reporting for duty. And all it will do is make peace harder to achieve. Exactly, of course, what the extremists want. No peace, no off-ramps, all bridges burning, and Ukraine a permanent abattoir in a suicidal holy crusade against Russia. So, if you want to start naming state sponsors of terrorism, let's do it. European sponsorship of Israeli terrorism in Palestine, Western sponsorship of Saudi terror in Yemen, ISIS, the product of French, American, British, Turkish and Gulf sponsorship in Syria and Iraq. Decades of right-wing US-backed terrorism against the Cuban Revolution, the Contras in Nicaragua, death squads in Guatemala, in El Salvador. Remember Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, horror after horror, terror after terror. There's nothing constructive about the pot calling the kettle black. Would you ever cop on, start championing peace and end the war which is patently in the interests of EU, Ukrainian and Russian citizens?
Bam. Bam. That right there is the moxie, the motivation, and the exact wording I would love to see anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. It's sad that I'm watching this from an Irish politician and no one's taken an example of this. No Canadian parliamentarian, nobody in, the United States, nobody in the rest of the European nations are looking to Claire Daly and seeing exactly what she's saying and pointing out the factual claims that she's making. Nobody's saying the having the moxie and courage to stand up to the retaliation of the war machine, the terror sponsor that goes around the world, and pointing out the obvious, that this is the pot calling the kettle black. You're blaming Russia for state-sponsored terrorism. What about all the war crimes the United States has done? What about all the war crimes? What about the WMDs, the 20 years of Afghanistan? The fact that we're in Syria right now, the fact that we're in we're parts of Latin America still. We're in Somalia right now. We just send National Guard troops from state to state over to the Horn of Africa. What's that about? You're telling me that Russia is apparently the only arbiters of state-sponsored terrorism? We have done it for goddamn decades, since before I was born, since before my parents were born. The United States has been involved in state-sponsored terrorism for as long as 1953, when we overthrew the Iraqi government and installed a dictatorship. We're the ones that are causing chaos and havoc around the goddamn world. And you're calling the pot, and you're calling the kettle, the pot the kettle black. I just screwed up that line. I'm sorry. I'm just so angry right now that I just screwed up that. I just butchered that line. You're calling the pot, kettle pot. Bleh, bleh. You get the point, right? It's a bit of a tongue twister. I'll say that. But you're never gonna see this. You're never gonna see this on any mainstream network. You're never gonna see this anywhere. And sadly, I have to show you this from, the Twitterverse. And it comes down to people like me, a 20-something-year-old in his basement in Canada here, to remind you that giving peace a chance is not dangerous. Giving peace a chance is actually the most humane thing to do. And calling out politicians for not giving peace a chance is the most patriotic thing you should do. And in fact, this is what, your founding fathers and historians have fought and died for. So that people like you should be standing up and railing against politicians, not coinciding them, not calling other people Putin puppets and Russia apologists and smear-mongering your friends and neighbors and family, but going after against global leaders that are supposed to protect you and keep you safe and keeping national security at peace, and now have jeopardized all of that for the possibility of nuclear war so they can capitalize on the war. You should be calling that out on the regular. You should be holding these people accountable on a daily basis. Bring on the ruckus, as AOC claims. But now AOC is too cowardly and afraid because she's part of the Democratic establishment. Now that anyone that does bring on the ruckus is being called violent or rude or disruptive or misogynistic or racist or any, identity politics scapegoat that they throw at you. It's just downright disgusting. It's revolting that only few people are willing to make that stand and have the courage to speak out. And, nobody wants to be in nuclear war. I think that's a very common thing for everybody. I don't think anyone wants to self-sacrifice themselves for a bunch of, geopolitical, globalistic leaders. Nobody wants it. So why is it only a few people are willing to call it out? Why is it only a few people that are willing to take the stand and actually hold the powerful accountable for all the inhumane destruction that they've done to this entire planet? Why are we not holding more accountability to the United States? Why, everybody's talking about, oh, well, Russia came in. Isn't that a war crime? They invaded into Ukraine territory. How many times has the United States invaded illegally in other territories? Did anyone hold them accountable? God, no. They're not even part of the UN's Court of International Affairs. Why? Because the United States is afraid to be held accountable. Because of everything that Claire Daly said. They're the ones that are sponsoring the most terror and the most oppressive regimes around the goddamn world. We create terror to capitalize on terror, and then we try to fight that terror. That's the business model that the military-industrial complex has used for decades. And now they're doing it in Ukraine. They're doing exactly the same exact business model. They created terror using Ukrainians and neo-Nazis and overthrowing their democratic elected government and having NATO aligned with them. They're creating this tension. They're creating this aggression. They're telling people to go fight against Russia. And as Adam Schiff even said, right in front of Congress, we're fighting Russia over there so they don't have to fight Russia over here. They manufactured this war using Ukraine as a proxy, and the innocent civilians have suffered long enough, and now people are calling officials out. Enough is enough. No to nuclear war. I can't believe I have to say this. It should be very self-common to every single individual, but I'm going to scream as loud as I can to make sure this is very clear to everybody. We are not self-sacrificing ourselves. We are not having a collective death wish in order to advance the warfare of the military-industrial complex. This is downright disgusting, grotesque, inhumane, indespicable, every name of the book. From bloodthirsty neocon goons that don't give a shit about life. That's what this is really about.